Hello, this is Brian Scuttle with Sonic Cinema. I'm pleased to present a recent interview I did with filmmaker David Shields on his movie Lynch: A History, which is currently playing on Topic. It's the story of NFL running back Marshawn Lynch, and it opens up into a larger discussion on race and the expectations of quote unquote good behavior that this country puts on black people. And it's a really compelling documentary, whether you're a fan of Lynch or football or not, because of the way that Shields opens up the conversation even greater with his visual narrative. And here's that interview with David Shields. Let's start with the most obvious question: is that what was the inspiration behind making the movie?
Well, I guess that the inspiration on the most literal level was watching Marshawn Lynch being interviewed by Deion Sanders at Super Bowl 48, and I just thought, you know, who is this person? Like, who is this person for whom every answer is this sort of magical mixture of eloquence, humor, rebellion, poetry, cryptogram. I just felt like I was so impressed by those 5 minutes that I wanted to unpack who that person was. I mean, behind that, of course, I've always have been interested in history, politics, race, media, sports, and that I had been trying to work on an adaptation of my book, Black Planet, Facing Race During NBA Season, with the writer and director James Franco. Oh. And that project had come to an end. We just hadn't been able to figure out how to make the film work. And so when that film came to an end, I still wanted to explore all those issues, again, sort of media, sports, race, history. And Marshawn would just stare me in the face. I lived in Seattle. I was a fan of him as an athlete. I was increasingly riveted by his amazing ability to sort of deconstruct the media interview. Mm-hmm. I've always been interested in people who break the fourth wall. I've always been a very political person. And above all, I just knew there was eloquence and magic and mystery behind Marshawn's seemingly whimsical refusal not to talk. And so I sort of went on a 4-year journey, clips and interviews and research to try to explain to myself and then an audience what was going on. Mainly that, behind silence, echo, and mimicry that Marshawn was sort of conducting this rather specific rebellion. And I think that's what the film tries to make painfully clear to the audience.
Yeah, and that was one of the things I found most interesting about the movie is that while it is very much about getting to know Marshawn Lynch, the athlete, Marshawn Lynch, the individual, it also puts him in the larger context not only of people who've come out of Oakland who are rebellious, but also the larger conversation on race that we've found ourselves in over the past few years, starting with Ferguson and including Colin Kaepernick's protest,
right,
and how that resonated at the time in the NFL. And I think that was one of the most compelling things. I think before I watched it, I half expected it to be sort of akin to like one of the 30 on 30 on Lynch, but I think the fact that it's more of a visual, it's almost a visual tone poem, and I think that makes it even more compelling than just having talking heads recounting this moment in history.
Totally. Well, thank you so much. I mean, it's very eloquent and very generous. I mean, you've really conveyed the essence of the film, both regarding the way the film feels, I hope, pretty timely and relevant and urgent right now, and also the way that is related to its methodology, that the last thing that we wanted was that either standard sort of 30 for 30 or kind of the Ken Burns standard, kind of biopic sports doc film where, that's the very thing that Marshawn is pushing back against, which for me is this sort of white corporate business narrative. The last thing that we wanted to impose was sort of that upon Marshawn's life. And instead that we wanted to make the film sort of feel like, a GoPro camera was trapped inside of Marshawn's helmet as he went on, Beastquake 3.0, and that we constantly told ourselves, to make the film feel like you're not watching television, but you're trapped in this very kind of frenetic, alive, unpredictable, violent, crazy-making, culturally energized space, so that we have 700 clips in 84 minutes, a new clip every 7 seconds or even more often. So the film feels like it's graffiti art or punk art or scratch art, and that felt to me very congruent with Marshawn's stance, which is why I think that Marshawn liked the film. That we showed it in Oakland a year ago, and he came up to me afterward and said, I wanted to hate on you, but I couldn't because you did a damn good job with it, which, was obviously very gratifying.
Yeah.
But I think part of it is the approach isn't, that standard kind of white guy sports doc. It's very much tries to be, kind of scratchy, and raw and, very, I'm white, I'm 30 years older than Marshawn Lynch, but I'm trying to, in a way, let Marshawn speak in the movie. Like it's his movie as much as it is mine. I'm just taking all the clips and running them together with a clear purpose. But, it's Marshawn's movie, and it's his performance chops that obviously carry the film.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the most interesting aspects about the movie is that you don't have any like current interviews with Marshawn Lynch throughout the film for him to tell his story. But at the same time, I think one of the things that's so great about the film is the fact that and it's good to hear that he felt like you did a damn good job of telling his story, because of the fact that I think, I'm a football fan, so it's like I've been aware of Marshawn Lynch for many years. I mean, I remember when that Super Bowl where he basically answered every question with, I'm here just so I don't get fined. And, it's one of those things where it's like, I didn't necessarily have a particularly strong response to it at the time. I thought it was quirky. I thought it was enjoyable. I thought it was funny. But at the same time, now that I have this perspective in this larger context of who he is as an individual, it really throws that into a larger perspective on who he is and sort of what is on his mind too. And I think that you're able to get to that without having any like modern day interviews of him to put out there is really compelling.
Thanks a lot. I mean, that's very meaningful praise to me. That's exactly it. I mean, that was the challenge of the film. How can we convey that without having these interviews? I mean, part of me is that I wanted to avoid having those conventional gestures, but part of it is that, necessity is the mother of invention, that we approached Marshawn and his representatives 4.5 years ago, and they said, that we won't impede, but that we won't participate either. And so given that, we had only a few options. One, jettison the film. Two, interview his acquaintances. But I think he would have asked them not to participate, or they would have known not to participate, and then, without Marshawn giving us the okay. And so in a way that we were forced back on our own resources, which in a way, several people, including Michael Smith of ESPN and other people have said is the best thing that could have happened to the film because, if we had, let's say we had a 3-hour interview of Marshawn and that we had, cut that into the film, in a way, it would have contradicted the whole purpose of the movie, which is that there's eloquence in Marshawn's refusal to explain himself. And then in a way, if he is sitting there in front of my camera and explaining himself, it's like, hey, wait a minute. I thought this guy is the guy who doesn't care to be interviewed. And if he's suddenly being interviewed by me, a white filmmaker 30 years older than he is, then in a way it contradicts the whole stance of the film. And I think by forcing me into this collage or montage mode, I think it really sort of forced me to dig deep into Oakland and its making of Marshawn Buffalo and its, creating a recoil in Marshawn from what he felt were invasive and racist sort of media inquiries to, a temporary high of Seattle and then Kaepernick and Trump making Marshawn's stance sort of go viral and political, and then how he's handed it off as cultural legacy to the next generation of athletes. I think that my point is that, I was disappointed at first that Marshawn chose not to participate, which was his total right. I definitely appreciated that he said that they would not impede. But above all, it forced me to ask myself, okay, what kind of movie do I really want to make? What thematic stakes are really here? What is the purpose of this film? It's not just a biopic or a sports pick. It's really about, deep, deep parts of American history going back to, the founding of the country and, slaves being brought to this country 400 years ago. And so I think it forced me to dig deeper into the thematic substratum. And, and then I do think, or I hope that, the kind of collage methodology of the movie fits pretty well in a way that I'm conducting my own mini film rebellion in a way, I'm refusing to speak conventional documentary film language in a way that's slightly parallel to Marshawn refusing to speak standard sports media language. So I think there's a kind of a funny parallel there that maybe helped Marshawn dig the film. I think if he had seen, a standard sports doc, he would have said, well, it's okay, but it's one more predictable thing. So anyway, obviously it was terribly gratifying that Marshawn liked the film.
What was probably the most surprising thing that you learned on the journey through making this movie?
Boy, there's so many things I learned. I mean, I learned a lot, everything from legal things to film things, because, I'm primarily a writer. This is the first film I made from beginning to end, to, cultural things, whether I as a white filmmaker have the right to make the film, to the joys and sorrows of collaboration. I had a whole group of people I worked with. People would come and go. People would quit. They'd come back. I mean, to the financial, it cost me over $100,000 to make the movie. I mean, just the financial thing of that. In terms of the actual material of it, what is the biggest surprise of it? I'm trying to remember what those surprises were. I guess the things that come to mind, it's such a cliche about Marshawn Lynch, like he's from Oakland, blah, blah, blah. But I had no idea how profoundly he is a product of Oakland. That was a really important thing for me. Secondarily, I would say how much he is made by the fact that his mother said little, but was always steadfast. His father talked a good game, but was totally AWOL. I think that hugely, hugely made him. That split between talk and action. I'm all about that action, boss. That's just you know, that is a huge part of who he is. And then a third surprise for me was how much Buffalo changed him. He really did feel that his answers would get kind of racialized, cartoonized, and caricaturized by the Buffalo media. And I was surprised to understand how totally his stance was, at the very least, deepened and in a way invented in Buffalo. Like he felt, if I don't talk, they can't corrupt my words. So I guess the Buffalo chapter, even though it's sort of an outlier in the movie, that Buffalo chapter in the movie was a surprise to me. Whereas Seattle, I sort of knew about, you know, the Oakland part I knew about. But I would say, you know, so how much he was made by he was made by his mother and father's differences in words and action. And then how much Buffalo was a total Waterloo for him.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. Really nice talking with you.
Same here.